for bone identification. We are now getting to hunting season, so we always have quite a few hunters in the woods. They find bones and they call us to look at them. 99% of the time it is very obvious an animal. We had it once where it was not. Bear feet are very consistent with human feet, and someone found a bear foot remains. A dog brought it up, and we actually had to have a forensic anthropologist look at it to determine it is bear and not human. We had a local clinical pathologist look at it, and they couldn't tell the difference because they're that similar. So, entomology is a study of insects. In the forensic setting, it's good for time of death to know how long that person's been deceased based upon the different insect cycles that were there. Injury identification. Insects typically like warm, moist membranes, so usually the eyes, the mouth, the nose, sometimes the genital area. That's where they will be primarily. If you have them in a different area that doesn't make sense, like in the middle of the chest with no trauma and that person's fairly freshly dead, you would be concerned for some sort of injury or something else there. Insects you could also collect if there's not much remains left, and you can test them for toxicology. They will not tell you the exact quantity of what's in there, but at least if there's any substances in that person. So forensic toxicology and hematology, which is the study of blood. So toxicology, we use NMS labs, and we test for any type of prescription medications and any illicit substances that the person might have. So we test blood, urine, and vitreous fluid. So vitreous fluid is a fluid in the eye, and it's actually very stable post-mortem where it's able to give us a good reading as to what was in that person's system. The vitreous is also really good for electrolytes. Blood post-mortem is very unstable, so that's unable to give us much information as to if the person had really high blood sugar or what else is going, whereas the vitreous is stable and is able to give us a good indication. We also do specialized testing at times, sometimes genetic testing, testing for carbon monoxide if there's any concern for a carbon monoxide toxicity, heavy metals or others as indicated, such as if we have someone who was stung by a bee, we could do different testing to verify that they did have an anaphylactic reaction. So x-rays can help us with identification, especially if we're looking for like dental x-rays to figure out who that person is. It's also a good tool to help document some injuries of that individual. And for accidents or traumatic death, assault victims, so anything that's a little bit more higher profile, if you're not able to palpate all the fractures, sometimes the x-rays can help with that. The main use that we use them for is to identify foreign body objects. Gunshot wounds, fire victims, so anyone who's burned where you cannot assess their skin really good, we do full x-rays on those just to make sure that there's nothing else that we're not seeing. And then any infants get a full skeleton survey to make sure that there's no indication of previous child abuse or current child abuse that could be part of the death. So this picture, what you're seeing right here, that's actually a bullet fragment, so that's what that would look like at an x-ray. Someone had a bullet in them, and the top one is nails. So after you get all of your stuff done, before you do your autopsy and everything else, you always need to make sure you have the right people as part of the investigation. So is it a case where detectives need to be called in? Does a crime lab need to come? Usually that's a decision law enforcement has to request, but sometimes we're involved in that decision process. The Special Investigation Unit is the county's drug unit. Wausau PD also has a drug unit that would respond if it is an overdose death. And also District Attorney's Office. Our office is state mandated to report any criminal death or potential criminal death to the District Attorney. So we have to make sure that they are aware of what's going on. After we do the autopsy, we get everything we need from the decedent. We release the body to the funeral home. We follow up with family throughout the investigation, and as results come back, and once all the results are back, we certify the death certificate and complete our report and close out the case. So our office is a busy office. We do more than just death investigation. We have to release cremation authorization, so anyone who dies within our jurisdiction and the family chooses that they want their body cremated, we have to view the body, make sure there's no injuries, any trauma, anything else to that person. And then we have to look into the cause and manner of death. Typically, we get it from the death certificate, and then we have to release a cremation. Once a body's cremated, you can't really test for toxicology, and you obviously have no more evidence, so it's really important that you make sure that that person is okay to be cremated. We do a lot of consultation for law enforcement for individuals who are not deceased, so if they had an assault case, they might have some different questions for us. A lot of questions for community partners. A lot of former medical examiners' offices call us as well with different questions and for advice. We do a lot of prevention initiatives. We have a suicide death review team, child death review team, fatal overdose review team. We're part of the Highway Safety Commission and part of Prevent Suicide Marathon County. And we also do a lot of education presentations and much, much more. All right, the skills needed to be a death investigator. The biggest thing is you have to be compassionate and empathetic. You are working with families at the absolute worst day of their life, the day that they had a loved one die suddenly and unexpected. We deal with infants to the elderly, we deal with natural deaths all the way to really brutal, horrific homicides. I mean, you see it all, and families are part of that too, so you definitely have to have the empathy towards them and what's going on. You have to have a really good understanding of pathophysiology, pharmacology, forensic science, toxicology, and injury identification, postmortem changes. You have to have good communication skills because you are working with multiple different agencies, families, the pathologist, law enforcement, hospital staff at times, the funeral home, and much, much more. So you need to have good communication between all agencies. You have to be a team player. Death investigation is not one-sided. You need all of the pieces of the puzzle to put it together for a comprehensive death investigation, so you really do need to rely on your community partners. You also have to be able to handle excessive stress. It is not an easy job. It is very demanding. You can't predict when cases are going to come in and what's going to happen, and sometimes you might have 2 deaths at the same time at the opposite sides of the county, or you might have a really big high-profile case going on that's consuming all your staff resources, and then have another case happen in the middle of that where it's really difficult. The biggest thing is you need to have integrity. Our job is 100% our opinion, based upon what you're seeing and what you're doing. You are in people's homes with sometimes a lot of valuable, you find lots of cash, you're with their medications. I mean, you have to have really good integrity to do the right thing. Any questions? Yes.
What are like the main differences between like your job and like a pathologist or a coroner? Like are just like pathologists doing autopsy?
Yep, so a forensic pathologist typically just works in the morgue. So their job is to do the autopsy. So the death investigators, so that's your coroners, medical examiners, they have all different types of titles. They're the ones who are going to the scenes, they're the ones interviewing the family, getting the evidence, doing all of that. They're the ones handling the body, determining that yes, this needs to be done. So then we take the body to a forensic pathologist who works in the morgue, and they're the ones who does the autopsy. Sometimes if your office is an office that has a forensic pathologist as part of your staff, they may go to a few death scenes, but typically it's only going to be a homicide scene just to look at the scene, or a really extremely suspicious death to say, yes, this is what I'm seeing. But typically they don't even go to those, they usually just review photographs.
So like the main difference is basically that you are actually going to the scene and
Yep.
looking at the body.
And it's the education and training. So a forensic pathologist goes to medical school. After medical school, they specialize in pathology. So they do a 3 to 4 year residency working just with pathology. And then after they're done with that, then they do another year of forensic pathology fellowship. So they work with a medical examiner's office for an entire year, and they complete like 200 autopsies in that time frame to get that exposure. So I mean, they have a lot more education and training than what the death investigators do. So they kind of oversee the work that's being done, but they don't go to it. Yes?
Okay, so this is gonna sound really weird, but I'm super confused. So when they do an autopsy, they take everything out, whatever. What if the family wants like an open casket funeral? Do they just throw everything back in there and?
So what they do for autopsy is, and even with tissue donation, they do it in a way so families still can have an open casket funeral. So they do a Y-shaped incision that goes like this. Yeah, it's kind of like a Y shape, so they still can have their chest looking normal, their arms and stuff look normal. All of the organs are put in a bag, and then that bag can get sewn back up inside of
Do you
them.
put it inside of them?
Sometimes they do, yes.
And there are like 9 orders and just shoved in a bag? And
Yes.
Oh.
Because you can't put them back in order in the body. They're cut up and pieces are taken, but it's done as dignified as possible, but that's the truth of it. And they still can do a full open, and then if they want to look at the head, they make an incision up here, the hairline, where they can't see it, and then they refract that, and then they take off the top of the skull. So if a good funeral director can put everything together so no one would know the difference.
So, is that just with an autopsy where everything gets?
Yes, that's only an autopsy. If there's no autopsy, then everything is normal and
They leave it in
intact.
there?
Hmm?
They leave like all the organs in there?
Oh yeah, the only time they take them out is at an
Doesn't
autopsy.
it stink?
After they embalm them, when they embalm them, that's when
Oh,
they're no longer.
so just dead organs, they stay inside.
Yeah, so if someone were to die and nothing was done, you are exactly how you were, like nothing is done. The only time they're taken out is if it's an autopsy. So typically we autopsy any infant death, unless if the kid had extensive history where you didn't need to. Sometimes we do have an infant that's not expected to live, but family takes them home and they die, we wouldn't have to. But anything that's outside of that is an autopsy. It's pretty much any child death, any sudden death that you don't know cause, and then anything suspicious. So those are the only cases.
When I was younger though, I remember touching my grandpa in his casket, and they told me that he had, cause he was like cold and it felt weird. They told me that he had like some kind, they put like a gel in replacement of blood.
That's embalming, so that's a funeral director. We don't do that, so that would be the funeral homes that do all the body prep.
So they do a lot with the dead body, like other than dressing them up?
Oh yeah, they do a lot.
They embalm them so they can put them in the casket so they don't deteriorate really fast.
What does that like consist of though?
Chemical.
That's not our job, you would have to have a funeral director come in. We don't do any of that. We
Well, there's
strictly
your
do
next
death investigation.
I have a buddy who's in that, Mike Peterson. He said such a nine business.
Well, now I'm curious.
Yes.
So then what happens if you're like an organ donor? Do you guys deal with that? Or do the,
So organ donors are very rare. Less than 3% of all deaths qualify for organ donation. You have to die at a hospital, be connected to a vent, and go through tons of testing, be declared brain dead, or have your brain function and your cardiac function so poor that you're going to die no matter what, and then die within a certain amount of time frame once removed. So that happens very rarely. We do work with decedents who are organ donors. We actually just finished a case with OPO this last day. So I mean, it does happen quite a bit. Tissue donors are the one that most of our decedents have a better chance of qualifying for. So for tissue donation, which they can't use the organs, but they can use like the eyes, the bones, skin, connective tissue. Those you have to no one lasts in a lifetime within 12 hours of us getting to the scene and being in the refrigerator within that 12 hours. And then you have to meet the medical criteria, no IV drug use, no recent incarceration.
So like, our driver's license for us that are donors?
Yep.
That's
Yep, so,
criteria.
yep, yes.
So like when you said there was like the off the mortise or something, when their body becomes stiff,
Yes.
how would you do that if you wanted to open casket, you know, because it-
So that dissipates, so after 24 hours, that starts to go away, so that you still can do full open casket, everything else. It's just one of those little things that help us determine how long someone's been dead and part of the process. So they still can do full casket with any of the changes.
Especially nowadays, it almost seems like when somebody passes away, it's usually, well, not always, but it's been, like you said, months later before they end up having some of the funerals and stuff, because you may be waiting for results?
They can go, when we release the body, they can get everything done, so even if we,
But,
like DNA,
right,
usually those cases, they can't have a normal funeral anyways, there's a reason why we're doing DNA. So they have either extensive postmortem changes, or they're like a severe fire death, so they couldn't do an open casket anyways. Yes.
What's your work-life balance like?
It's a lot better than it used to be. We actually are good staffing. When I first started, it was very difficult because I was on call 50% of the time, which makes it really hard to have a social life and have some downtime. But now that we're fully staffed, our on-call schedule is 1 day during the week and every 4th weekend. And then obviously I help out if anyone else needs it, but it's a lot more manageable. And then obviously we have our busy streaks where sometimes you might not have you might have just a few cases in 1 week, but then you could have 10, 15 cases the next week, so it just kind of varies and fluctuates, but.
with holidays coming up, are you sort of, is there a big ramp up in?
Our busiest time of year is the fall through after Christmas, fall through February.
So she shared with me at the beginning of class, right now their office is by